Hi, and true to Blizzard's word, as soon as one patch is released, almost immediately, the PTR for the next patch is coming online. So we're moving into a situation in Legion where we constantly have this duality between the live game and the PTR for the sort of people who are interested in testing things out and seeing what's coming up and experiencing it for themselves. But what is the PTR for? And it's not a rhetorical question, this one. What it's about is, I think that over the course of World of Warcraft, like a lot of things have changed in the game, I think the nature of PTR has changed as well. And I don't really think that, because you see this in comments where there's always a lot of confusion when a patch goes live, the last few patches. So there seems to be a difference between what the Blizzard developers think the PTR is for, and of course they determine its objectives, and what the player base think the PTR is for. Now, they've just announced a few initial patch notes for patch 7.2.5, and I'll be talking about that a bit more when the PTR actually goes live later this week. There's a few interesting things on there, such as a transmog competition type event within the game, but the most interesting part of it will be the fact that time walking raiding is coming in the form of Time Walking Black Temple. Now, it's not necessarily the first one of these. We sort of had a Molten Core one a couple of years ago. I assume it's going to run much along those lines, but I'll talk about that later. I want to talk about what is the point of the PTR now, because particularly after 7.2 has hit, there were a number of things that people were testing out in the 7.2 PTR. I didn't have time for that much, but I had time to do a little bit, and I was able to do my video on the first day priorities for 7.2. And I noted in that video that we wouldn't be able to get access to flying straight away, because not only was the rep going to take a little bit of time for even, die-hard people, but the invasions, which at the time were a necessary component of that, were not going to be accessible to the second week. So we sort of knew that content is going to be time-gated. We know that now. I've talked about why content is time-gated in a video a few days ago. But the problem was that even on the eve of launch, people who had taken an interest in the PTR still didn't know how that was going to work out. We didn't know about the mob scaling on Broken Shore because Blizzard hadn't communicated that. And I want to say right from the start here, I've actually been very impressed with the fact that Ian Hazzikostas, ever since becoming game director, has been very, very keen to communicate with the player base. Communication has definitely made vast strides since he became director in the relatively short time. He seems quite keen on it. But there's still very obvious things missing from that communication. Another thing we didn't necessarily know about. So when the Nether Disruptor building was built, someone in my guild who was rather rash, it has to be said. So that allowed you to get the quest for legendaries. And he immediately saw, oh, I can make some profit from this. And he decided to swap his engineering for blacksmithing. So he cancelled his engineering and then immediately somehow couldn't wear his belt. So he had to put a ticket in for that. But he then leveled up his blacksmithing up to 800. So he spent 30,000 gold, something like that, so that he could then get the quest to get the blacksmithing patterns. Only he couldn't. And it's intended. And it's fair enough in a way. The fact that you can't change your professions while the Nether Disruptor is up and to get those patterns. Obviously, they see it as some abuse of it. I don't really see it myself. But okay, fine, whatever. But he didn't know that. And there was no way he would have known that just from patch notes. It wasn't mentioned, and you'd have thought it was a fairly big thing. If Blizzard have deliberately put something in the game to stop you switching professions, even at the cost of tens of thousands of gold, to take advantage of getting be able to craft these legendaries, then surely, if the point of that was to dissuade people from doing it, surely they should have told people that this was going to be the case as well. Otherwise, you're not dissuading them. You're preventing them getting the legendary patterns, but they've snookered one profession and spent a lot of gold on leveling up the next profession. Not great communication, is it? So, and there was another, there were a number of things that we thought we could do straight away. And it wasn't just me. If it was just me, I'd have thought, well, I didn't actually have time to do 7.2 PTR extensively, so maybe I missed some things. I'm sure I did miss things. But there were people who spent a lot of time on that PTR and explored a lot of it, who were also broadsided, basically, by the fact that a lot of content that you know, they thought they'd be able to do straight away, they couldn't do. And then also, a lot of content was changed. Like, they immediately pulled the invasions from the requirement for the Pathfinder Part 2 within a few days. There were lots of changes within a few days. And we're not talking about bugs. We're talking about things where you think to yourself, the reason you made those changes is because it wasn't properly tested on the PTR. But I'm going to suggest that this has been the case for a long time now. The PTR is not for testing. It's now a bit of a misnomer. And to highlight this, I could sort of go back to betas as well, because it's the same thing with the beta is like a PTR for a whole expansion, or at least, you know, the main nuts and bolts and foundations of an expansion. And the same sort of pattern is there as well. There is, you can't say there's no communication. There are. Developers get involved in conversations there. But there's nothing around testing as such. You don't feel like you're testing. I'll contrast that with the first beta I ever did for World of Warcraft was Wrath of the Lich King, you know. And in that, I remember doing quests. And when you did a quest, a little survey popped up and it asked you about little things about it. So you could rate it, you know, how much did you enjoy that experience? So they were collecting information on how much we enjoyed the stuff. And they could do with that now, because I'm actually also today going to bring out a video on what I think is the most pointless quest they've brought out in Legion so far that I had to endure yesterday. It was an absolute nightmare. Not in terms of difficulty, just in terms of tedium. But they don't do that anymore. I've done the last few betas now. I mean, after Wrath, I didn't do Cataclysm. I wasn't playing the game then. I was sort of taking a break. But I did the MOP beta, and I was in fairly early on that. Not in the alpha, but on the beta. I did the WOD beta again in very early on that one. The Legion, I was actually in fairly early open alpha. So I was playing that right back from, good 9 months before release. So, you know, I've had a lot of experience in recent expansions of doing these betas. And you do not get the feeling that your testing matters a jot. So what is the purpose of PTR and beta? To my mind, I'm not saying they take no regard of player feeling. It's just that whenever they do make major changes within them, I never get the feeling that it's in line with what the community is saying. What I feel the two purposes of PTR now are, and beta, and alpha come to that, are first of all testing the stability of everything, making sure that you can get a lot of people in an area and it'll sort of work without crashing all the time. We don't want the days that we had in vanilla where on patch day the game was basically unplayable or could easily be unplayable and you can't log on and all the rest of it. We had the same thing at WOD launch as well, but that was, you know, as they said, because an unexpected number of people playing it. Quite how it was unexpected when the only people that could play it on the first day were the ones who had pre-ordered it, I don't know, but whatever. But they don't want that again. That was very bad PR. It was very bad for the players, very bad for everyone. So server stability is one thing. Another thing is advertising, marketing. I mean, if we look at what Blizzard have announced for 7.2.5. Now, I don't expect them to write great big long details of stuff. I mean, the PTR is going up quite soon. They want to say a little something about it. But this is all advertising. It doesn't actually give us any information. It reads as a marketing pitch. You know, when they say with bullet points here, so similar to patch 7.1.5, 7.2.5 is what we're considering a smaller patch for Legion. That said, it still has some pretty substantial content updates, including an epic time-twisting questline involving everyone's favourite walking paradox, Chromie. Not mine, sorry, because she chose the form of a gnome. But, nonetheless, look at the language of that. It's getting you interested in it. It's not a matter of fact we're putting this into the game. It's for marketing purposes. We've got these adjectives here. Epic time-twisting questline, blah, 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 blah. Next one, an assortment of new events, including the Auction House Dance Party, the Moonkin Festival, and a transmog competition we're calling the Trial of Style. Okay, that's fine. And then, here we go. 3 words, Black Temple Time Walking. Again, it's all designed to, you know, as a wow factor type thing. It's like, this is what's coming. We're not going to tell you anything about it. Make your own conclusions until you actually see it in game. And of course, when this, and they've actually said here, when the PTR realm does go live, are we going to be able to test all this stuff? No. We're going to be able to test a small amount of it, which is fine because it's not already. I get that. Remember what they said about bringing the PTR out immediately after the previous patch? Obviously, we can't get the whole patch on the PTR. That's something that was a marked difference from before. We can't get that now. Because before you might have the PTR patch up for what, I don't know, a month or something like that. People might disagree on that one, I can't remember. It seemed to me to be roughly a month-ish, a few weeks. Now it's going to be up for several months, this PTR. And we're going to slowly get things over the course of that PTR cycle until the patch is ready for release itself. So that's fine. I'm not moaning about the fact that it's not going to be up there. It's the fact that, and I'm not moaning about anything in particular with this, it's just to show that I think it's larger from a marketing point of view. I mean, if we compare, for example, alpha and beta testing when a new expansion comes out, I'm assuming that this year's BlizzCon, they're going to announce the next expansion because they're going to need to start getting the alpha for that out a month or two later. The first people who will be invited into that alpha, when it goes open, obviously there'll be like secret alphas before that. But the first people who will be able to go out and be able to talk about it openly, no NDAs or anything like that, will be who? Because they always invite two groups of people into it's a relatively early stage of so-called testing. You've got people who stream and do YouTube stuff. In other words, are doing stuff that helps promote it. Even if they're going to criticize it, it's still promotion. And the second is high-end raiders usually get invited into it so that they can actually test the nitty-gritty of it all, in particular the raid encounters and things like that. In other words, more serious players. And it's always the streamers that get invited first. They are the first lot through the door. And then usually a few weeks later, then the raiders get their invites. Not all, unfortunately. I was lucky last time because in my guild, everyone in my guild, bar like I think 2 people got, or maybe a few people, got that invite, and some didn't get it at all until it was getting right to the end of beta. Fortunately, I was able to get that. And hopefully I will next time, but there's no guarantee for it at all, because as I say, the only ones who are guaranteed to get it are the so-called influencers, the ones who are going to talk about it on YouTube or on Twitch or on forums, something like Wowhead, stuff like that. They will get their invites in very early on, because it seems to me it's a marketing thing. And although they change things over the course of the beta and the PTR, I don't get the impression, as I said, that they change it according to what the community says. I mean, a really good case in point as a Retribution Paladin is when the Greater Blessings came in, when that system came in. Initially, when it was announced, before anyone got to test it, it sounded all right. Okay, this sounds decent. I think I said as much. As soon as then I got to try and test it out, again, in its implemented form, it seemed okay, not quite as good as I thought it was going to be. Then Blizzard said what they intended for it to work, how they intended it to work. And it was a long time before they actually implemented that. So there was a lot of misinformation going around, people still thinking it was going to work. Even influencers, big influencers who nonetheless weren't taking an interest in that thing, talking about it knowledgeably as if they play the class and spec, but didn't. And giving a lot of very bad information to hundreds of thousands of people, were talking about it as it was in the game, but they didn't actually get it working as they intended for a long time afterwards. And the people who actually played that class and spec, myself included, were very scathing of it. They said, this will not work. This is a terrible idea. And we're very clear about that. And Blizzard's response, who did respond, was very bullish, and you don't know what you're talking about. And they, of course, have since changed it. They've changed the thing that was really terrible, but they wouldn't do that until it after it went live. So it's almost like the testing is when it goes live now. They don't test anything until it goes live, or respond to feedback until it's gone live. So if they're not going to respond to feedback, and again, it also comes to, Blizzard might say, they will obviously say, they're not going to say, oh no, we don't listen to customer feedback. They're obviously going to say they listen to feedback. They will try and say it on a regular basis. But here's the thing. How can you even provide feedback? It could be argued that en masse we can't even provide feedback, because how can you provide feedback when you don't get to use the thing as it's intended? Like, there was some content on the PTR that we were doing, but because we didn't know that Blizzard intended to time gate it, that changed it completely. the fact that you couldn't do certain things straight away affected what the feedback could have been. And the other thing, again, coming back to the scaling mobs, how can we provide feedback when we don't even know you're putting it in the game? And it wasn't obvious from PTR. How could it be obvious? Unless you were, as I say, playing on characters with wildly different item levels. And not a lot of people do that. So if we don't get that information in the PTR cycle, then we can't provide that strong feedback anyway. And then, so yeah, the testing happens when it goes live. So what happens during PTR? What happens during beta? It's a marketing exercise. It's a stability exercise. And I'm not saying there's no testing at all. Bug reports, things like that, I'm sure are eagerly looked upon. But other than that, when you look at conversations that Blizzard have with players during a PTR or alpha or beta cycle, you do get the strong impression that what Blizzard are doing in that conversation is trying to present their point of view, rather than taking on board what's been said and thinking about it. It's almost all, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but here's our point of view. You think you want it, but you don't. That's very much the strong impression I think we're getting. But anyway, there's my view of PTR. As I say, as soon as the PTR does go live, unlike the last one, I do intend to do a little bit more on this one to bring some things. So the first thing we're supposed to be able to test is this trial of style. I like that idea. Transmog competition. I'm interested to see how that's actually going to work in an in-game environment. I'm quite keen on that one. So we'll see how that goes. I'll bring you that one later. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share. And until next time, I'll see you later.